Heavenly Father, we ask that you would open our hearts and minds to your words, to our seeing what happened in the past and how you protected your people and how you trained them. May we learn from this story, this history. We pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. Okay. Well, we have Buddy with us now?
Yep.
Okay.
Good morning.
Good morning. Susan, where
Morning.
See, that looks like footnotes. Footnote 13. Okay. I'm just above that. WHC proper has made ingenious suggestion that loathing is a response to the reptilian swarming of reproductive activity exhibited by the Israelites. Okay. Footnote 13 at crushing labor. A ruse is an adverbial form derived from a root that means to break into pieces, to pulverize. And 14, work. Following a prevalent stylistic practice of Hebrew narrative, the writer underscores his main topic, the harshness of slavery. By repeating a central thematic key word, indeed, the Hebrew literally says their crushing work that they worked, but in English, the cognitive accusative form sounds awkward, except for a limited number of idioms, like sing a song. 15, the Hebrew midwives. Hebrew is regularly the designation of the Israelites from a foreign perspective. Shifra Pah. The first name suggests beauty. The second name, as Ugaritic text indicates, might originally meant fragrant blossom and hence girl. But since the root Paha can also mean to murmur or to gurgle, Rashi inventively suggests it is the sound of a nurturing woman making a soothe an infant. In any case, the introduction of just two heroic midwives reflects the way this entire narrative, in contrast to Genesis, has been stylized and simplified. Ibn Ezra appears to grasp this principle of schematicism when he proposes that Sephara and Push, in fact, would have had to be survivors of a whole battalion of midwives. Okay. 16, birth stool, literally double stone. Although there is some debate about the meaning of the term, there are preserved grounds, persuasive, there it is, persuasive grounds to understand it is a double stone or brick statue that the childbearing woman gripped as she kneeled, the standard position to give birth. There's an Egyptian magical papyrus that announces it is to be recited over the two bricks of birthing. Okay. 19, for they are hardy ought, is derived from the verb to live, which has just been used twice in connection with the newborn. Hence the King James Version lively, though in modern English, that unfortunately suggests
Vivaciousness.
pervasiveness or bounciness. The fact that hayat as a noun means animals may reinforce the strong connection between the Israelites and their procreative forces of natural world, like animals. The Hebrew women need no midwife. Okay, 21. Diane, you want to take those? Can you?
He made the household for them. Although some have seen Pharaoh as the antecedent of he, God seems considerably more likely. The sense would then be they were rewarded for their virtue with social standing, establishing their own families or something of the sort. 22. Pharaoh charged his whole people. Despairing of cooperation from the Hebrew midwives in his genocidal project, Pharaoh now enlists the entire Egyptian population in a search and destroy operation. Every boy you shall fling into the Nile, and every girl you shall let live. The schematic, as against historical or even history-like character of the narrative, is evident in this folktale. Antithetical symmetry. The idea is presumably that the people would be eradicated by cutting off all males, progeny, while the girls would be raised for the sexual exploitation and domestic services of the Egyptians, by whom they would, of course, be rapidly assimilated. Pharaoh's scheme will again be frustrated, as the future liberator of the Hebrews will be placed, not flung, in the Nile and emerge eventually to cause grief to Egypt. There is also an echo here of Abram's words to Sarah when they come down to Egypt. Adam, upbraiding the destiny of their descendants. During a famine, they will kill me, while you they will let live. Genesis 12:12.
All right. Well, so we get all the way back to that statement. Okay. We're at chapter 2. Any thoughts on those footnotes before we go?
Well, what they were doing, he said it was genocide.
Yeah. They were getting rid of the males and letting the females live. I don't know, they were in a mess, weren't they?
Well, that's where last week I said it doesn't make sense, because males would grow up to be slaves.
Well, let's think about this a minute now.
Yeah.
When the Egyptians didn't want to do pastoral work, period. All right. Would that indicate maybe they didn't even knew nothing about raising a herd? That you take care of the female livestock. You might sell off the male, but the female you hang on to because you want to get more production, more little ones to grow up. So maybe they were ignorant in that respect. At least it would appear that the hierarchy was. They were. Anyhow, I would caution against thinking of this as just as a story, like the individual that's trying to tell us. I mean, he makes every effort to do that, but this is what was given to Moses from God concerning what took place, and then this is what Moses grew up in. So we continue on this. Remember that
Was Moses part of the bloodline of Christ? I don't think so.
well, he has to be part of the Abrahamic covenant. He's part of that. He's part of the children of Israel.
But he's not part of the bloodline.
You know, they never
I
do.
don't think he's mentioned in the New Testament as in any of the ancestral texts. You know, you're right, Dave. His name is absent. I mean, David's always mentioned in those,
Yeah,
you know, Matthew and you know, Luke or wherever they talk about the ancestry. But yeah, now that you mention it, I don't think Moses appears there.
I don't either.
no, he doesn't appear in the bloodline of Jesus, at least.
Yeah.
But the
So he's like a granduncle or great great granduncle or something like that, but not in the bloodline.
yeah, he's not in the direct descendant line.
I thought it was also interesting the way that the footnote mentioned that the original genocide plan really didn't amount to much, that, you know, the official program. And so the entire population was, recruited to participate. And I kind of wonder, like, that, as you mentioned, Pharaoh owns everybody, so I guess he can just demand that everybody do that. But I kind of wonder if some kind of, maybe anti-Jewish, anti-Semitic rhetoric was used to stir up the people to, kind of go after the Hebrews.
Well, they're afraid of them, obviously, that they outnumber them. If you look at Egyptian history, and I only remember very little of it, but the Haikos, that's another way of describing the foreigner, the Hebrew, the outsider, the one that's not truly Egyptian, that the foreigners that came in and ruled Egypt for a period of time.
Well, the word Hebrew is the same in the Egyptians used. I don't know what the origin, who first used it, but it means from the other side of the river.
Yeah.
And so the people, the Hebrews, were referred to as these people from the other side of the river, from the other side of the Red Sea, from the other side of, the Euphrates, from the other side of the Nile. I don't know, but people from the other side anyway. Across the river, across the tracks. Yeah.
Okay, well, let's start then with Genesis chapter 2. Dennis, you want to take that on?
And a man from the house of Levi went and took Levi's daughter, and the woman conceived and bore a son, and she saw that he was goodly, and she hid him that 3 months. And when she could no longer hide him, she took a wicker ark for him and chalked it with resin and pitch, and placed the child in it, and placed it in the reeds by the banks of the Nile. And his sister stationed herself at a distance to see what would be done to him. And Pharaoh's daughter came down to bathe in the Nile. Her maidens were walking along the Nile, and she saw that the ark amidst the reeds, and sent her slave girl and took it. And she opened it and saw the child and took it, and it was a lad weeping. And she pitied him and said, "This is one of the children of the Hebrews." And his sister said to Pharaoh's daughter, "Shall I go and summon a nursing woman from the Hebrews, that she may suckle the child for you?" And Pharaoh's daughter said to her, "Go." And the girl went and summoned the child's mother. And Pharaoh's daughter said to her, "Carry away this child and suckle him for me, and I myself will pay you your wages." And the woman took the child and suckled him. And the child grew, and she brought him to Pharaoh's daughter, and he became a son to her, and she called his name Moses. For from the water I drew him out. And it happened at that time that Moses grew and went out to his brothers and saw their burdens. And he saw an Egyptian man striking a Hebrew man of his brothers. And he turned this way and that, and saw that there was no man about. And he struck down the Egyptian and buried him in the sand. And he went out the next day and took 2 Hebrew men were brawling, and he said to the one in the wrong, why should you strike your fellow? And he said, who set you as a man, prince, and judge over us? Is it to kill me that you mean as you killed the Egyptian? And Moses was afraid, and he thought, surely the thing has become known. And Pharaoh heard of this thing, and he sought to kill Moses. And Moses fled from Pharaoh's presence and dwelled in the land of Midian. He sat down by the well, and the priest of Midian had 7 daughters, and they came and drew water and filled the troughs of water their fathers to water their father's flocks. And the shepherds came and drove them off, and Moses rose and saved them and watered their flocks. And they came to Reuel, their father, and he said, why have you hurried back today? And they said, an Egyptian man rescued us from the hands of the shepherds. And that, what's more, he even drew the water for us and watered the flock. And he said to his daughters, and where is he? Why did you leave the man? Call him that he may eat bread. And Moses agreed to dwell with the man, and he gave Zipporah his daughter to Moses, and she bore a son, and he called his name Gershom.
Gershom.
Or shall-
For he said, a sojourner have I been in a foreign land.
All right, let's stop there. Let's go back and pick up the notes up to that point. All right, so that will go all the way back to 1. Took.
This verb is commonly used in biblical Hebrew for taking a wife, even when wife is elided here, as here. It is worth translating literally because the verb is echoed in the woman's taking the wicker ark, verse 3, and in the Egyptian slave girl taking the ark, verse 5. She took a wicker ark and caulked it with resin and pitch. The basket in which the infant is placed is called a teba ark, and the same word used for Noah's ark. It may be an Egyptian loan word, but such borrowed terms abound in the story, giving it local color. The most prominent is the word for the Nile, Yeor. As numerous commentators have observed, the story of Moses begins with a pointed allusion to the flood story. In Genesis, a universal deluge nearly destroys the whole human race. Here, Pharaoh's decree to drown every Hebrew male infant threatens to destroy the people of Israel. As the ark in Genesis bears on the water of saving remnant of humankind, the child born on the waters here will save his imperiled people. This narrative recapitulates the flood story itself, a quasi-epic narrative of global scope. In the transposed key of a folk tale, the story of future ruler who is hidden in the basket floating on a river has parallels in Hittite, Assyrian, and Egyptian literature, and approximate analogs in many other cultures. Otto Rank sees the basket as a womb image and the river water as an externalization of the amniotic fluid. Amniotic fluid. Psychoanalytic speculation apart, it is clear that from the story that water plays a decisive thematic role in Moses' career. He is born safely on the water, which Pharaoh had imagined would be the very means to destroy all the Hebrew male children. His floating along the reeds foreshadows the miraculous triumph over the Egyptians that he will lead in the parting of the sea of reeds, Yosef. His obtaining water for the thirsting people will figure predominantly in the wilderness story.
All right, stop there for just a moment. The first of what we started reading initially, a man from the house of Levi went and took a Levite daughter. All right. We were talking about the bloodline of Christ. the Levitical bloodline were the Levites were the ones that ended up being the priestly class and being the caretakers of the temple. So the answer is no. They will keep. Obviously, Moses was not in that bloodline. All right.
But then it goes on to say that, not here it doesn't, but that his brother was Aaron.
Yeah, that we'll find that later.
Yeah, and then he was one of these priests.
Yeah. And that's why he ends up. Yeah, I'm looking at the priest line saying, well, we see the Levitical priest line that they all will develop into whatever specific group they're supposed to be. But he's a Levite. All right. The continuation of this back to where we 6. And so the child, the Masoretic text, she saw him, the child. But other ancient versions show saw without the accusative masculine suffix. And looked, it was a lad weeping. Lad, na'ar, is more typically used for an older child or a young man, okay? But it may be employed here to emphasize the discovery. And look, whatever, that this is a male child. It might have also been relevant that the nahar occurs elsewhere as a term of parental tenderness, referring to a vulnerable child. The fact that this is a male child left hidden in a basket would be the clue to the princess and her entourage that he belonged to the Hebrews against whom the decree of infanticide has been ensued. Nahum Sarda notes that this is the sole instance in the Bible in which the verb to weep is used for an infant, not an adult. Okay. The child probably much more vulnerable, weeping and laying in a basket floating on the water, available for the predators on the water to make lunch out of. Good reason to weep. 10, and the child grew. The verb clearly indicates his reaching the age of weaning, which would have been around 3. This might have been long enough for the child to have acquired Hebrew as his first language. Okay. The same verb grew in verse 11 refers to attaining adulthood. Because a son to her became a son to her. The phrase indicates adoption, not just an emotional attachment. Moses, this is an authentic Egyptian name, meaning the one who is born, and hence son. The folk etymology relates to the Hebrew verb besha, to draw out from the water. Perhaps the active form of the verb used for the name Moshe, he who draws out, is meant to align the naming with Moses's future destiny of rescuing his people from the water of the Sea of Reeds. This Sea of Reeds thing, this again is higher critical stuff. It's kind of a lake or swamp area, 4 to 6 feet in depth. And this is what they would make the crossing of the Reed Sea or the Red Sea, whatever. Of course, then Pharaoh's army would have to be drowned in the Reed Sea. That would make that another miracle in itself. Um, so, but this has nothing to do with the acceptance of what really took place, which is going across the Red Sea as they went back to, oh boy, Midian,
Oh,
which would require them to cross the Red Sea because they were in the wadis going down through to the sea itself, and to the north, they would have had to gone up against an Egyptian garrison that was at the top of that Red Sea leg of the Indian Ocean.
couldn't it be the Sea of Reeds? Could it possibly be that the Egyptian would flood periodically?
Yeah, and they this is all a higher critical effort to downplay this thing and trying to make it something that well, it's not a great miracle. No, what took place, where he has to go and where he went back to with the children of Israel, required them to cross something that, well, as deep as our Grand Canyon. And if you look at the way that it works out, those wadis over time left basically a land bridge about 500 feet under the water of sand. You can see it today if you Google Earth and go to where that's located and Google that area. And it's just a sloping down and then back up where, on both sides of it, if that bridge wasn't there, it's just as deep as the Red Sea. And there is an area in there where the current has gone through and then got back to its regular depth. And we take submarines down through there, actually. So, just more higher critical. Let's make it so we can understand it and accept it. No.
But I never thought that Red Sea, Reed Sea conflation made any sense anywhere outside the English-speaking world. I mean, that red and reed. I mean, if you back translate into Greek or Hebrew, it doesn't come out that way.
No. This is a.
So I never did get that.
Yeah.
I never could appreciate that red and Reed Sea conflation.
This is they ended up naming an area up where it's in Egypt, coming out of the Nile area that
East of the Nile Delta.
Yeah, basically the finger of it out in there. So anyhow, don't be fooled by it, even if they. Yeah, this really was, if you take it into its true context of where this took place, and like one of the greatest miracles or physical act that God actually did. And, to trivialize it, which is what, this is during the period of time of the JPD theory. And the great German scholars, making little of it, trying to be sarcastic about it. So, anyhow,
but we're not trivial.
that's what this does. Whenever you make
Well,
this Red Sea,
these authors they're making comparisons that just aren't there.
yes,
I see it. I always think about the movie, the Ten Commandments, and it looked to me like the Red Sea, where there was a lot of water there.
yeah, it was.
Yeah. And it was probably a pretty good depiction of what actually went down. Yeah.
Well, graphically, Cecil D. DeMille, I think that's who it was, did an excellent job of putting that together.
Yeah, you're talking walls of water.
Yeah. How they did that in you know in their graphics, I can't answer that, but I was told that that was Jello. And I don't know how you do that stuff, but they did an excellent job.
Uh,
Okay.
Not to change the subject, but just a little something that I want to say about. I saw that. Was it the weekend when the Pope went to South Sudan? And they've been having. I take it South Sudan is that's where the Nile starts, somewhere up there, somewhere.
Yeah, there's a Blue Nile.
Ethiopia.
One of the legs of it, the Blue Nile and the White Nile, they're major rivers up there. And up there by Juba is one leg of it, and over it's like it's a very rapid running, very large river at that point at Juba. And if you go over to Akubo, that's the other leg of it. They come together. And very, very fast, very quick moving river. When I looked at it at Juba, I said, man, that certainly would be a place to put a power station to, to generate electrical. But you heard how they were doing that in Ethiopia, and what the trouble they're having with Egypt as far as doing that, putting that into effect. They were ready to go to war.
But they've been having these rainy seasons. I guess it's really been raining a lot in the South Sudan, and I saw where all the farmland, which probably would be farmland or for herding animals, was all flooded. It was all underwater.
Well, that's a common situation for about 6 months of the year there, and that's why their herds of cattle have to be moved from where they're growing them on the Sudan grass, not what they call it, to other places where it's higher up, so that the cows are not in the water.
Dave, they do agriculture just like the Egyptians do on the Nile.
Yeah.
It floods and then the water recedes and they plant in that rich floodplain. And then it floods again. It's a yearly cycle.
Well, it seems like it's pretty good farmland.
Yeah.
If they could control the flooding.
Well,
you can't control the flood.
they rely on the floods for their agriculture. They not like we do here in the United States.
They're not dry farmers, huh?
It floods and they plant after the water recedes, they plant, and they don't water it. They don't do anything with it. And then after the season's over, it'll flood again and bring more rich silt soil into the area. So that's just their method of agriculture. And it's the same as it was in Egypt and the flooding of the Nile.
Probably goes back centuries.
Yeah.
And the Nile, actually, the White Nile and the Blue Nile actually come together in Khartoum, which is the
To North
capital of North Sudan, of Sudan. So you actually can see the two rivers come together. They're actually different colors. You can see where they come together. That's why they call them the White Nile and the Blue Nile.
But in the Bible, they always talked about, and we studied this in Crossways, that they always talk about these water crossings, not just in Exodus, but if you go through the books of the Old Testament, they're always talking about there's something to do with water or crossing water.
Yeah, crossing the Jordan normally.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's pick this up where we were at. And Dave, you want to take it?
Yeah. And and saw there was no man about, although the obvious meaning is that he wanted to be sure the violent intervention he intended would go unobserved. Some interpreters have proposed, a little apologetically, that he first looked around to see if there was anyone else to step forward and help the beaten Hebrew slave. And this is Moses we're talking about.
Yeah.
Okay. About is merely implied in the Hebrew. In any case, there is a pointed echoing of manish, an Egyptian man, a Hebrew man, and no man, that invites one to ponder the role and obligations of a man as one man victimizing another. When the fugitive Moses showed up in Midian, he will be identified presumably because of his attire and speech as an Egyptian man. Why should you strike your fellow? The first dialogue assigned to a character in biblical narrative typically defines the character. Moses's first speech is a reproof to a fellow Hebrew and an attempt to impose a standard of justice. Rasha, the one in the wrong, is a legal term. 14. Who set you as a man, prince, and judge over us? These words of the brawler in the wrong not only preface the revelation that Moses's killing of the Egyptian is no secret, but also adumbrate a long series of later incidents in which the Israelites will express resentment or rebelliousness toward Moses. Again, man is stressed. Later, Moses will become the kind of epithet for Israel's first leader. The Hebrew davar variously means word, thing, matter, affair, and much else. Midian. The geographical location of this land in different biblical references does not seem entirely fixed. Perhaps because the Midianites were semi-nomads. Moses's country of refuge would appear to be a semi-desert region bordering Egypt on the east, to the west by the northwest of present-day Elat. Sat down by the well. The verb yashav, sat down, is identical with the previous verb in this sentence, where it reflects its other meaning, to dwell or to settle. It makes sense for the wayfarer to pause, to rest and refresh himself at an oasis, as Moses does here. And I picture this in the Ten Commandments.
Yeah.
Yeah, it did. It looked like an oasis. And then there was a well. The well has the idiomatic force of a certain well. 16, 7 daughters came and drew water. By this point, the ancient audience would have sufficient signals to recognize the narrative convention of the betrothal type scene. Compare Abraham's servant and Rebekah in Genesis 24 and Jacob and Rachel in Genesis 29. The future bridegroom or his surrogate encounters a nubile young woman or women at a well in the foreign land. I picture this too. Water is drawn. The woman hurries to bring home news of the stranger's arrival. He is invited to a meal. The betrothal is agreed on, in keeping with the folktale stylization of the Moses story.
Okay.
Is this author being a little bit the higher critic here too, Pastor?
Yeah, that's what you're hearing.
Yeah, that's what that stands out, yeah.
Yeah.
The usual young woman is multiplied by the formal lake number 7. In 17, the shepherds came and drove them off. Only in this version of the betrothal scene is there an actual struggle between hostile sides at the well. Moses' intervention to save the girls accords perfectly with his future role as commander of the Israelite forces in the wilderness of the liberator Mosiah of his people. 18. Why have you hurried back today? With great narrative economy, the expected betrothal scene verb to hurry, Meyer, occurs not in the narrator's the report, but in Ruel's expression of surprise to his daughters. 19. He even drew water for us and watered the flock. Their report highlights the act of drawing water. The Hebrew stressing the verb by stating it in the infinitive before the conjugated form. Dala, dala. In this translation, even drew. The verb is different from Masha, the term associated with Moses' name. Is Moses a Hebrew name or is it an Egyptian name?
Moses is supposed to
Praise the-
A Hebrew?
be no, Egyptian.
Oh, okay, all right. Because it is the proper verb for drawing water. Whereas meza is used for drawing something out of the water. In any case, this version of the scene at the well underscores the story of a hero whose infancy and future career are intimately associated with water. There you go. Number 20, call him that he may eat bread. Call here has its social sense of invite, and bread is the common biblical, oh boy.
Synodox.
Syndically.
Means food.
Synodosh for food. Reels, boy, you get tongue-tied after a while reading all these strange pronunciations here. His eagerness to show hospitality indicates that he is a civilized person. And in the logic of the type scene, the feast offered the stranger will lead to the betrothal.
Okay, let's stop there and go back to where we were in the narrative, which is 21. And he said to his daughter, and where is he? Why did you leave the man? Call him that he may eat bread. And Moses agreed to dwell with the man, and he gave Zipporah his daughter to Moses, and she bore a son, and he called his name Gershon. For he said, I, a sojourner, have I been in a foreign land. Okay. 23, and it happened when a long time had passed that the king of Egypt died, and the Israelites groaned from the bondage and cried out, and their plea from the bondage went up to God, and God heard their mourning. And God remembered his covenant and Abraham and Isaac and with Jacob. And God saw that the Israelites, and God knew I don't know where that's taking me. That doesn't take me anywhere. Okay. So we go back to footnote
20.
20. Uh, and
Or 21.
yeah, we've been over 20 twice. Okay. So 21, Zipporah, the name means bird. 22, Kisham, a sojourner have I been. In keeping with the biblical practice, the naming speech reflects folk etymology, breaking the name into ger, sojourn, and sham, there. The verbal root of the name, grsh, would appear to refer to banishment. Okay, well, it all fits. 23, bondage, the Hebrew avodah, is the same term rendered as work in chapter 1. Okay, and 24, moaning, the Hebrew naaka, is a phonetic cousin, though to the word for groaning. Naha, reflected in the previous verse. In effect, this translation tries to simulate through rhyme. All right. 24. Until this point, God has not been evident in the story. Now he is the subject of a string of significant verbs. Here, remember, which in the Hebrew has the strong force of take to heart, see and know. The last of these terms marks the end of the narrative segment with a certain mystifying note, sufficiently mystifying that the ancient Greek translators sought to correct it because it has no. God knew, but what did he know? Presumably the suffering of the Israelites, the cruel oppression of history, in which they had now are now implicated. Obligations of the covenant with the patriarchs and the plan he must undertake to liberate the enslaved people. And so the objectless verb prepares us for the divine address from the burning bush and the beginning of the Moses' mission. I would only point out to you that God revealed this to Jacob before he died. He talked about how long they would go down into Egypt and that they would sojourn there for this while, and there would be oppression, and then that it would come back out. And that was back there in Genesis.
What happened to the part where, like, wasn't Moses raised in the court of the Pharaoh?
Yeah, well, all of that is kind of left to the imagination of our movie writer. He became her son, is basically saying that. And then his going out and seeing his people, there's quite a gap of time in between there, and he goes out as a prince, as a man.
Yeah, he was a prince.
So that's it. The Bible doesn't say anything more about it. The rest of it is backfill from imagination.
So he knew he was adopted by Pharaoh's daughter as he grew up.
And it's based on what he was referred to in our Hebrew text. Yes.
But he was nursed by his birth mother. Is that right?
I'm
Yes,
sorry. You broke up on my sound at the very end. It just kind of,
He,
What
he
did you
was
say?
nursed by his birth mother. That's right?
Yes,
His
Yes.
birth mother gave him up, but she wound up nursing him.
yes,
she was
then
part
what?
of bringing him up.
Yeah. But after he's weaned, he has no connection with his birth mother.
we
He
don't
never
know.
knows it. He never knows his birth mother.
The scripture doesn't tell us. There's great
She
grandson.
she just fades in a picture. You don't hear anything about her.
No, and the text, the writer suggested it was 3 years at 3 years old. But I do know that, for example, American Indians nurse up to 4, 5.
But
So
it's it's just a really good story, but there's been this translation, there's a lot of gaps to the story. And like
Well,
you say, you're
yeah,
supposed
the gaps to the story that we have or that we know has been told to us, but what we have actually in the scriptures, what we just read.
Well, I think that what I recall of what I've seen, especially in the movie, entirely makes sense.
Yes. The writing of filling the gaps, it makes sense. It sets a scene that so it's historical fiction in that respect, because we don't have anything that says anything about that. But the people that have written their stories and the like, they've done a nice job.
Yeah, it connects the dots. That's what I was trying to say.
Yeah, well, it's between the dots that they're.
Well, otherwise, if you were just reading this story for the first time, you'd probably wonder about it. You'd be struggling with it a little bit, I think. Yeah. But he ends up a sojourner and he ends up at the oasis.
Yeah, and he ends up fighting the shepherds, struggle over water. The struggle over water takes place in many places. And he's a hero at the well. They point out that this has happened before. It's recorded before. Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Isaac and Jacob especially. Isaac's servant. Actually, it was Abraham's servant, but that struggle took place.
But the
And-
Pharaoh,
And then they're referring back and saying, "Oh, well, this is just a prototype of the writer." I would say what you're reading is what really took place.
but the Pharaoh at the time was Ramsey. Is that correct?
No, that's just a. That's a
Supposed to
guess.
have been Ramses
Really don't
II,
know. We
but
really
there's some disagreement about that.
It talks about building the cities of Ramsey. But we don't know where you're getting that reference from.
Not from the Bible?
Well, it's from the Bible, but when it's called the city of Ramsey, was it before or after he's Pharaoh? Okay. He's somewhere in there. That's the best you can say at this point. It's as early as 1300 BC. I mean, as late as 1300 BC, as early as maybe 1500 BC. So, you've got a pretty wide spot in between there. Then we talk about Ramsey I, Ramsey II, who knows?
But there were these big public works projects going on.
Oh, yeah. Egypt had a lot of things that were being built and built in stone.
Amazing.
Yeah, much of that stone was floated in, according to what the archaeologists have been able to figure out how they moved the blocks and everything into where they did their building. By building canals and stuff like that to bring the stuff in.
Well,
Okay.
they were engineers, that's for sure.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's go on then with our text, which is now 3 minutes.
Might as well stop.
Yeah, I think probably it's a good place to stop. So we pick it up. Chapter 3.